get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo. And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you could be with us, whether you're listening at www.behindenemylines.radio.us, or if you're checking us out on AM radio, FM radio, the internet radio, or if we're traveling along with you as a podcast. We're glad to be along for the ride with you. We got so much to talk about this week. Again, in the era of Trump, there is no such thing as a slow news day ever. There is too much going on this week. We're going to try to cover as much as we can, from the palace intrigue at the White House, who's coming, who's going, to what the results of the Pennsylvania special election for the 18th district means, to once again the People's Republic of New York State turning a blind eye to corruption, and you know what? We had to reset the clock again, so we'll talk about that as well. But first, let's get to this Pennsylvania special election. I know there's going to be a lot of doom and gloom given these results. And as we sit here with the show right now, the returns are just about in. It looks like Connor Lamb, the Democrat in the race, is holding an ever so slight lead over Rick Saccone, who is the Republican in the race, in the 18th Congressional District. A district that is soon to hit the dumpster of history because it will be gone by November. And we're going to get into a lot of these reasons, but I want people to know certain things here. For those of you who don't know, don't listen to the show, maybe tuning in for the first time, we're glad to have you. What I do, besides this radio show stuff, is I do handle some election law here in the People's Republic of New York. And given that experience and working on recounts and different get out the vote campaigns and things like that, I'm going to try to give you as professional of a takeaway show as I can on this special election. There's going to be a lot of people out there sounding alarm bells, and I'm not going to say that you shouldn't be. There are definitely reasons to be alarmed here. But I want people to understand and put into context what this race and the outcome of it could really mean for 2018, for the midterms, and for going forward towards 2020 as well. When you look back on special elections and the impact they have, let's understand exactly what happens with a special election. It's an off-year election where the timing of it is not regular. The breakdown of the period is not regular. There's something happened in the news where the incumbent is no longer there. Whether if you're from the People's Republic of New York, some sort of arrest, indictment, corruption, conviction, whatever. Or if you're from another state, it could be a promotion. It could be they won another seat. It could be taking a seat in the executive as part of a cabinet, whether it be at the state level or national level, whatever the case may be. But special elections, as much as people want to say to you, oh, the results of this race, and again, as it stands, we have Lamb up by 0.4%, or less than 1,000 votes right now, where over 209,000 votes were cast. People are going to say to you, oh, this is a referendum on Donald Trump, and, this is a total rejection and repudiation of Trump's policies and Trump's character and Trump's demeanor, and all this stuff. And I used to believe that. I used to believe that special elections are bellwethers and that they do mean something and they send a message to the executive. I thought that back in 2010, 2011, we saw Scott Brown win on the Republican side in a very, very tight race against Martha Coakley in Massachusetts for Massachusetts Senate. And everyone said, that's a bellwether. The tide is turning. This is a repudiation of President Obama. Same thing in the People's Republic of New York, a race that I worked on. When Bob Turner took over Anthony Weiner's seat after, well, you know what happened with him. But when Bob Turner won that race against David Weprin in 2011, everyone said the tide is turning. If a New York City race can turn Republican, what's going to happen in 2012? And of course, we all know what happened in 2012. So, let's start out with saying special elections are not bellwethers for presidential elections. They're just not. And there are reasons why they're not. First off, they're not happening in presidential years, most of them. You rarely see a special in a presidential year, as we're getting more alerts here. Looks like everything's still staying the same. But you rarely see them in presidential years, mainly because people don't want to skew them. And when you do see them, they are typically hyper-local, hyper-partisan, and turnout is not the norm. What do I mean by hyper-local? Local issues take the forefront. National issues can sometimes take the front, but 9 times out of 10, a local issue will come to the fore. With Bob Turner's race, there was an issue outside the district with a mosque in Manhattan that was being built. You may remember all that. And I remember the Orthodox Jewish community came out strong for Turner because he came out strong against this mosque, even though it wasn't in his district. David Weprin did not do well in certain parts of the district, even though he was Orthodox, because his positions did not match up with the community there. So that was a big boon. Hyper-local. It's also very hyper-partisan. If you're voting in a special election, you are really paying attention to politics in your area. You're really aware of your local issues and your regional issues and your national issues, and you're turning out. There's a saying out there, which may or may not still be used, depending upon who you talk to, of the triple prime voter. The voter that shows up for the primary elections, that shows up for the off-year elections, that shows up for the presidential elections. That's not your average voter, folks. As much as we want it to be, it's not your average voter. These are the people who, again, are really paying attention to what's going on and have an understanding of politics, and they have an established viewpoint. And that viewpoint is typically not shaken. They're usually ingrained. They usually have their position, and they're going out to support the laundry. They're voting for the candidate who is best and closest to their own political identity. So that's the first point. Second point we need to talk about is, in particular with this special election, it's happening in the state of Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, as much as I want to be the most rah-rah, sis-boom-bah person out there for Republican and conservative politics, I'm here to tell you Pennsylvania is not a Republican state. Pennsylvania is at best purple. Yes, Donald Trump won in 2016, and when he did, that was the clearest indication that things were going his way. Why? Because as much as Republicans have wanted to win the state of Pennsylvania collectively, they haven't been able to do it in prior elections. It's always been the tease. It's always been that girl at the bar that's giving you the eye and then walks out with the other guy. Pennsylvania has always been purple. At least for a decade. Probably more. And probably back then it was more blue than anything else. So, when you look at a Pennsylvania special election, although the district was carried by Trump by 20 points, that's the outlier. That is the reaction. And remember, these are the voters that turn out for the presidential. They're not the hyper-partisan, hyper-local people that are showing up. Especially in a district that is disappearing. And this is my third point. This district is not long for this world. It's a special election for a district that is going to be out of existence by the November general election in 2018. Remember, the winner of this race has to run somewhere else. They're not going to be running in the same district. It's going to be redrawn, redistricted. Pennsylvania right now is fighting for lines to make sure that they're clearly drawn. I know the Pennsylvania GOP has filed lawsuits to reestablish the lines as they currently are, despite a previous ruling stating that the lines were improperly drawn contrary to federal law. So we'll see what happens with that. In a district where the lines are going to be redrawn anyway, believe it or not, I have experience with this in a local race. Turnout again comes down that much more because a lot of the people are going to say, why am I even bother? This person's only going to be here for a couple of months anyway, and then they're not representing me. I'll turn out in November when I know who's going to be representing me for the next couple of years. So again, hyper-local, hyper-partisan, irregular turnout in a disappearing district. Yes, Trump won it by 20, but there really isn't a comparison in the two races. One race had a year and a half of campaigning on a national level where everybody was under a microscope with billions of dollars being spent. This is more of a localized event. That's why you're seeing such a difference. And you see Pennsylvania kind of reverting back to the way it was prior to the Trump wave of 2016. Another phenomenon we should really examine is the campaign that Connor Lamb, the Democrat in this race, ran. And by the way, the gap is tightening. We're down to 585 votes with 98% reporting. We're down to 0.3%. I'm going to have another point to talk about in a second on this. But back to Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb is not your typical progressive Democrat that we've been seeing. He's trying to portray himself more as a blue-collar Democrat, a pro-Second Amendment Democrat, an anti-Nancy Pelosi Democrat. And he's trying to show his own people who may skew to the right, but are not necessarily on the right. Probably more center-right or center than they are conservative. He's trying to show these people that pick me and I'll represent your point of view even though my party label says Democrat. Because he knows he's already going to get the hyper-partisan, hyper-local people on the left. They have nowhere else to go. He ran a race, and this is a shrewd move that I would be concerned if I was the GOP that may be replicated. He actually ran a race towards the center, not towards the far fringes of the party. You could argue that Trump won the same way, that he appealed to populism rather than partisanship. In this case, it was more of a moderation of hyper-partisanship. Because the hyper-partisans that show up, they're going to vote the laundry. They're going to vote for the label. They're not necessarily going to worry about the guy. So Connor Lamb, give him credit for recognizing that, and give his people credit for recognizing that. All of this comes out to a race that is way too close to call, folks. But we still got 2 more points, and then we're going to take a quick break. If I was the GOP, I'd be worried right now. Why would I be worried? Besides yes, hyper-partisan, hyper-local, all the reasons not to be worried. Here's the reason to be worried. There was a libertarian candidate that peeled away 1,300 votes, or close to triple the margin of victory right now, away from Rick Saccone. If you add up the percentage of the Libertarian and the Republican there, you're over the 50% mark. And you're winning. You're winning this by about 1,000 votes. Well, more like 800 votes. So, if you're the Republicans, you got to worry about a little bit of this libertarian backlash here. Clearly, the ticket was split slightly. This libertarian candidate, Drew Miller, peeled away votes. When you have a third-party candidate that's greater than the margin of victory, that should be concerning about how you ran and what you did. Because clearly you didn't appeal to the big tent of the GOP. So you should be concerned that Democrats are getting the message out there, at least in this district, of part of your platform and appealing to those center-right or marginally right people.